My name is Tyler Hardiman. I hail from Central Florida, and I'm a software engineer. I've been a software engineer for a little over a year and a half now.
Awesome. Do you mind sharing which company you work for?
I'd love to. Navex, we specialize in global risk compliance software.
That's awesome. So Tyler was a student with devCodeCamp, so he got his coding journey started with us, graduated from the program. During this conversation, we're just going to learn about Tyler's journey, why he decided to get into software engineering in the first place, what that looked like for him, what some of his challenges were. So, Tyler, the way I like to start these conversations is really taking it back to the beginning. So, what initially got you interested in coding and software engineering, and what were you doing before you got into software engineering in the first place? Kind of talk us through where you were before you got started.
Started my days in retail when I was young. I worked retail for about 15 years. I worked in the pet industry, I worked in the grocery industry. I worked in the grocery industry for about 6 years. Did everything from, once again, part-time stock clerk overnight to worked at the corporate office with them. So I had a lot of different experiences. Very challenging of both these jobs. Being retail, the schedules are demanding. Salary positions, you're missing holidays, you're working late, you're working overnight, you're missing a lot of family time. Started to have issues. Retail took a toll on my body. My knees, concrete floors and knees don't mix for that long. I started to have back issues. I wound up with a major surgery, which kind of set the tone for, like, can you do this? Can my body physically handle what I'm doing now for the next 15 years? Can I be an active father, to my children? Am I going to be able to do the dad things with them if I continue on this path? And then COVID happened, and found myself out of a job during COVID. I took a couple months, did a lot of research, put together binders on how the stock market works. I made an investment, and the investment worked. And from this investment, I started a small business. It was family owned. It was my partner at the time's art business. Did great. We had a lot of fun with it. We learned a lot of stuff. And then things started to, life changed. Life was like, here's a curveball. There was a separation. Had to sell our house. I was living off savings and 401k from my previous job at that point. My children were a huge piece of this at this point. It's like, what can I do to ensure their comfort and their necessities going forward? And retail was not it. It was the biggest calculated risk I had taken in my life of making a career change. The previous experience of the long-term retail and everything prior was like, I don't want to do that again. You spend as much time with a company or doing a job than you do with your kids. What did I want from my kids, but also what could I give them that maybe I didn't get?
Yeah, a way to take a step forward, not just for yourself, but also in a generational sense. That type of thinking is not very common. A lot of times, people in those situations, understandably so, they're in survival mode. They're not taking the step back. They're not trying to take a look at the whole picture. So it really reflects upon your character that you're willing and able to do that in that headspace. And the second thing, I just want to kind of connect to the people that might be watching, especially folks that are considering making a career change the way you did. What I'm seeing you describe here is how complex and challenging that decision can be. Right? It's not a small thing, especially if you've been doing something for a while. It may not be a thing that you love doing necessarily, but
It's what
you can do it well. It's what you can get paid for it. You can make ends meet. And jumping
Yep.
into something totally new that you haven't even tested yourself in yet, it can be pretty scary. And I think there are a lot of people out there who could resonate with that.
That's a lot of times when people don't make the change. That's why I didn't make the change for 15 years. It was consistent. It was
Mhm.
comfortable. It
Yeah.
was known.
Well, I think that's a good segue into how did you then land on coding and software engineering as the thing that you were going to take that calculated risky leap into?
For me, it was the possibility of what that could do. I had always liked, you know, computers. Carmen San Diego
Yes.
yep, that was
that was the thing.
yeah, that was I remember that second grade, and that was the first core memory. But you know, as I got older, computers to me were an escape from kind of the challenging realities I had, you know, growing up. It always played a piece in my life of happiness and excitement. It was always something that I looked forward to. No matter what was going on, I always looked forward to it. And the first thing that got me considering the coding camp was that feeling. I knew I liked it. I loved the ideal of it. I loved the possibility of it, but I was horrified at the risk. You know, it's going to cost time with your kids. The small business, I was giving that up. But then I sat down, I literally one night sat down and I was like, I really like this. The data kind of made sense. The reward was higher than the risk.
Yeah.
I made a list. What are the benefits? If I complete this camp, what will I get? Stop struggling to make ends meet. If you want to make money in retail, you have to do salary. And in salary, you have to give up family pretty much. You have to give up time and you can't get that back. I can count on one hand the amount of Christmases that I had with my family.
Yeah.
Work-life balance. Stop the damage to my body. Possibly love my career for the first time in my life. Those were kind of like the positives for me when I was weighing it out. And then I wanted to put down the failures. There's a possibility that this might not work. And what am I going to do if that? So I listed this stuff out, going back into retail management. and that was already, you know, just I can't do that. Less time with my kids, once again, going back to the retail time. You know, I'm not going to get that flexibility, that work-life balance, and continuing a perpetual cycle of just working. Once I had made these lists and gone through everything and processed and been like, okay, wait everything out. I like it. I want to do it. And the longer I thought about it, the less likely I was to take the risk.
What you're describing up to that point is analysis paralysis, which we see with people who are obviously considering the camp, but we also see it with students because it's very easy to get stuck in that cycle of trying to think. If you think enough, then maybe you'll come up with the right solution, but you won't really know whether a solution is the right thing until you try it. And it can feel safer to stay in that place where you're analyzing and thinking it, because at least you're not actually having to deal with exposure to what really happens when you test the idea with action and have reality kind of hit you back and let you know what the deal is.
It's very important to weigh the major things that could happen, but use those as motivation to be like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. And you know, you've covered that territory. So anytime you start to falter again or start to have doubts, you can just go back and like, well, I've already covered this ground. I know what the possibilities are. It's, if this fails, is it more of a risk to stay where I am or more of a risk to try something different?
Yeah, that, and I had already told my son at the time that Daddy was going back to school. That was always a big thing. I'd be like, "Oh, Daddy's doing great in school." He'd be like, "Yeah, me too." You know, it was just, it was a really cool motivator. I started camp December 13th, 2021. I will always remember the dates. I needed to really kind of step out of that comfort zone to really see some potential, see some growth. You know, like when I say I was living on savings, I mean, homelessness was a real possibility. That's how I started. It was a very quick, calculated decision.
Your story is really going to connect people who are probably finding themselves in a very similar situation, trying to do the same thing, weigh the pros and cons, take the risks, you know, figure out if it's a risk worth taking, what's the risk of not taking action. So you did the boot camp. Just briefly, can you talk a little bit about your experience as a student and especially some of the challenges that you ran into, maybe some that were unexpected?
First thing that stands out to me is the routine of the way the camp functioned. At the time, I didn't recognize it, and the level of communication, the fear of asking for help because you're afraid to look like you don't know what you're doing. That was a lot of personal growth that had to happen. I felt constantly behind during camp. And it's an information fire hose is the best way to describe it. And spending the time outside of class was great, but also your fellow classmates. The more you communicate with them, you start to realize you're all in the same boat. You can really lean on that. And it can be a new level of support for you going through it because the camp in itself is challenging. You are going to struggle. you will fail. I can't tell you the amount of times that we would, spend after class or meet on a weekend or something, a couple of us and just, go over something, go over a project we're working on. Dan is an instructor there. Dan was actually one of my classmates. he helped a lot of us. He was awesome, but realizing that your classmates are resources and they're also a support system. I think that was the biggest experience during that camp. I've always been a do everything myself kind of guy. I'll get it done. I'll do this. I'll do it. You have to start relying on the people around you and start working with the people around you and understand you guys are in a similar situation.
One of the biggest things that I know is a struggle for everyone that takes the camp is that communication factor, is that willingness to be able to let go of that proud, I can do it all myself standpoint. But the communication piece you highlighted is critical. And then you highlighted the people aspect. The thing that I think is the hardest to communicate about what we do here specifically is it's the people. It really is the connection between instructor and student that makes it work. Without that connection, there is no success. This is really hard stuff. I mean, I've taught former lawyers, medical doctors, folks that have been through some pretty intense postgraduate education, and they still say that learning this stuff was some of the hardest education that they've done. So you did the camp, you graduated, and now starts the job search. So can you kind of talk to us a little bit about what that experience was like for you, how you went from boot camp graduate to employed at your first gig?
There was never a point in my experience with the camp during, before, or after where I ever felt like I was bothering someone or someone didn't genuinely want to help. Every one of them practiced what they preached. You can learn this stuff and a lot of people teach it, but it's the people that are teaching it. And I just kind of wanted to come back to that. It left an impression. But going on to the job hunt, first thing I'll say, DCC has a great career service. We did, resume, we did cover letters, interview prep, LinkedIn, being able to refer to somebody as a resource with, application questions, position questions, getting some feedback on like, hey, I had an interview. This is how it went. What could I do differently? That is what set my path to go forward into the job hunt, because without that, there's a lot of unknowns in there. Utilize the career service. It'll give you direction. And I think direction after everything you've went through is extremely important.
I like to call it metabolizing. Like you've just had this experience where you've taken in so much. And what a lot of people don't think about is, okay, I get on the other side of graduation, the job hunt's a whole other thing, but I still have all this stuff that my brain's metabolizing as I'm trying to engage in this next process where I might be facing rejection. There's a whole other set of challenges that comes along with that. So like you said, leaning into the support structure that's available for you is kind of key to being able to make it through that.
When it gets to the actual job hunt itself, connections, network, connect with people, connect with like-minded people, connect with like-minded groups, interact. The biggest piece of it is interacting. You can make the connections, but if you're not interacting, you're not going to meld the two together. The way that I was able to get the interview, it took about 3 months. The first official interview I had was the place I got hired. It was really exciting, but it was strictly based off of the connections I had made. For instance, the company that I'm working at now on LinkedIn, they'd have different events. It was just more of like a seminar, but interacting, signing up for those, going to those, putting a face to the name, that is what got my foot in the door for the interview. They're like, hey, I remember you from the seminar we did. You want to be consistent. I think in consistency and providing value.
You just took the words out of my mouth. If you're the type of person that is just connecting because you're hoping that person's going to lead to a job, even in that virtual environment, people can sense that neediness from a mile away because they're getting that all the time. And it is so refreshing when someone comments on a post or makes a connection with you, has a conversation, and that connection is the point, not the thing that they think they might be able to get out of that connection.
They deal with hundreds of people wanting a position, and being able to provide value really stands out. I would think of it more as a what can you give than a what can you get.
There are a lot of people who might be listening who may be in the job search process and they're new, so they don't have previous experience. and you're on a platform like LinkedIn where it's all about sharing expertise. You might think, well, I don't have anything to give, I don't have any value to offer. But if you're the type of person that's just being really encouraging, just that simple act, like I really appreciate what you said about this. It resonated. Thank you so much for sharing it. And that's the interaction. Trust
That
me,
is,
you just provided a huge amount of value and people remember that. The folks that genuinely showed appreciation, those are the ones that stick out. So even if you feel like you don't have anything to offer, trust me, just by being a human being of character, you have a lot to offer.
your character is going to weigh exponentially more than your ability to code. Being a junior, being a beginner, companies are looking at you as an investment. They're not hiring juniors to be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to hire you as an entry level and I expect you to know all this off the bat. They can train you and mold you and teach you the way they do it. If they want a senior or they want somebody that can do these functions off the start, they're going to hire a senior. They want somebody they can picture a future with.
You represent potential risk for their company. Companies are big on
100%.
managing risk, and any hire of a brand new talent is going to represent probably some of the more significant risk that they're going to take. They're going to have to train you. They're going to have to, work with you through all those movements until you're at a place where you really can contribute that value. It's not even just about the number of applications you put out or how many stars on your GitHub or any of that stuff. It's showing a pattern of who you are as a person over time. Okay, you landed the role. Can you just talk about what your job is and give us a snapshot into some of the day-to-day of what you actually do with your time when you're working?
So I was hired in as a software engineer. My primary job focus, I do a lot of QA.
And so just for folks that may not understand that acronym, QA is quality assurance.
Quality assurance test.
Okay.
Yes. For me personally, I do like automation testing. I write automation tests. PRs, part of it, GitHub, you'll get that through camp.
Pull
doing PRs.
requests, by the way, for folks that don't know what PRs
Sorry.
are. No, it's okay. It's good for people to hear the real world terminology. Just want to make sure that we're fleshing some of that stuff out.
Typically, the way it functions for us is two people have to approve a code pull request before it's able to be merged into, whatever repo it's going to. Manual testing and test plans. We are in the initial planning phase. We're in the development phase. We work hand in hand with the developers. Bug smashing is fun. I do a lot of automation. I call it bug smashing. Retrospectives. And retrospectives are where the whole team gets together and we have a board and we go through and we detail what were our weaknesses, what were our opportunities, what did we excel at, maybe things that held us up, what were blockers during our process.
It's an opportunity to step away from focusing on the product and focusing on how you as a team are working and improving how the team works. So you see this a lot in software development cultures where there's just this drive to not just make better products, but improve the way we work, which does actually create better products in the process.
That collaboration, there's not a lot of individual work that's done. I could have a task that technically is individual, but you're always in communication with another team member.
So did you come into the job expecting that level of collaboration before you got started, or was that something that may have surprised you?
I did not expect that in the workforce, and I was thoroughly surprised at the level of collaboration or the level of teamwork that occurs. Face-to-face communication, getting on calls, call them huddles, or getting a little meeting. It's very hard to infer things from text. This was something that did not exist in retail, but maintaining a sustainable working pace. We as a team get to decide how much of that workload we take. And it really helps us to not burn out.
I actually think that's a great segue. Typically, how we'll finish out these conversations is I'll ask the person that we're in conversation with what advice they would give to their earlier self who was just about to start out on this career journey.
So I have this thing, and it was called Advice for My First 6 Months as a Software Engineer. What were my experiences and what did I learn from them? One of the big things was the ability to receive and provide constructive criticism. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Never at any point of working with the people that I work with have I ever asked a question where they've looked at it as stupid. You're going to get a new hire checklist wherever you start. Stay on top of it. I think that's a great way to introduce yourself to self-managing the type of responsibilities you're going to have in that position. Create routines utilizing your calendars. Make sure you're writing stuff down because there's a lot you're going to forget.
Knowledge work is a totally different set of skills. I think that organizational planning piece is one of the key things because you're dealing with non-physical output. It's all these things that lives on screens and on sheets of paper and may not even be visible to other people. So your ability to develop routines and systems to manage that flow of information, I think is the make or break between people who are successful and maybe people who are successful but are really struggling because they don't have those systems in place.
Big part of your growth, you're going to fail. It is okay. It is acceptable. It is acceptable if you communicate and you grow. Manage your expectations. It's going to take time. There's a lot of information. You might be really fast at other things previously in your life. This is not it.
You may see other people who seem like they're getting it faster than you are, and let that go too. Like you're on your own path, your own journey.
You're where you need to be, when you need to be. The next thing real quick is imposter syndrome. I ask myself sometimes, sitting here doing this as a living, like, how did you get here? The people around you will tell you. You're not going to get a 6-month review and they'll say, hey, for 6 months, you've been messing this up.
And now we're going to tell you.
Yeah, you're going to know. So just take heart in the fact that the people around you are going to kind of guide that. I want to get to the dev ones. I'm so excited to get to the dev ones.
I am too. I really can't wait to hear what folks told you and who you talked to. And I'm really excited about this because this is a new one. I don't think we've had an alumni come onto one of these spotlights who took the time that you did very graciously to reach out to people and gather those responses.
And my team they were excited that I was getting an opportunity to do this. They thought it was really cool, but they were excited to answer the questions. And I posed 2 questions to the team, and I asked everybody, as an established dev, what is one piece of advice you would have for a new or prospective developer? Or if you could go back to when you were starting in the industry, what is one piece of advice you would give your past self? First one, so the manager of software engineering for us, he really pointed out the importance of continuing education in the role. It's very easy to get in the role and be like, man, I'm here, I did it. But that's the start. Every Friday at work, we get time to research, learn, take a class. That hour or 2 they give us on Friday pays them dividends overall in the work that we provide them. One of the senior software engineers from our team, get comfortable with failing early, but ask questions. Get comfortable having your seniors critically analyze your coding decisions. Do not take criticism personally. They want to mold you into something productive for the team.
That's a hard habit of mind to unwire because we so often invest a sense of personhood in what we produce.
Yep.
And so when someone is criticizing your work, it feels like what they're actually doing is criticizing you.
Another one, he said, specialize in one thing, master it. What the senior software engineer said was he wore too many hats early on and he became a jack of all trades, which is great. But the note that he made is it delayed his progress into more senior roles.
So you should be able to touch a little bit of everything, but there should be one thing that, like if someone says out loud, front ends, just as an example, if someone says front end, your name comes up immediately.
Another senior software engineer, his thing was do not apply for senior positions starting out because in the interview process, they will smell that out. It kind of puts into question everything else in your resume. It's often worth the risk of taking someone newer and giving them on-the-job training until they're in the position you want them to be. They're okay with you not knowing. They want to know that they have the potential to mold you into what they need.
There are definitely some people I've seen that fall into that trap. If you do land that interview, it's immediately going to become apparent whether or not you're actually capable of growing into that role. If everything comes back to trust on a team, why would you want to take a risk on someone who you can't even trust on their resume off the bat?
When I started with Navex, I had 0 experience in the tech stack that we use. We started with Python when I went to camp.
Yeah.
We do C# here. So my character played every bit of the importance in me getting hired here because I did not have the experience with the tech stack that we use. I do now, but don't over apply. It's okay to not know. Let's see. Explain your process. Your thought process is super important when you're being hired during an interview. Talking your process out. We call it in camp, we learned it as rubber ducking.
Rubber ducking.
The last one I have is from a senior staff software engineer. And I'm just going to quote what he said because he said it very well. No one's going to make you succeed. You got to drive yourself. You must drive yourself to learn new things, to leave your comfort zone, and acquire new skills. He made some comments about, being focused on code line by line, like system to system connections versus line by line code. Understanding how the things are interacting together is a great way to understand what the code is doing.
It's context efficiency, right? Like if you're working on a problem and you understand the big picture of the system, it's going to take way less time for you to zoom in or hone in on where the thing needs to happen, where the code needs to be written. And then you can get into the nitty gritty of, okay, now what does this actual solution look like?
It's extremely beneficial in helping you ask better questions. The better your questions, the more precise your questions, the more directed they are, the quicker not only your response is going to be, but the quicker you move forward. Personal responsibility and integrity are important. Take responsibility for your work. The buck stops with you. You will fail, and when you do, own it. That builds trust. If you make a mistake, it's okay. It's not okay when somebody else finds it and figures out that you made the mistake and you never said anything.
And it could be a little scary the first couple of times you're in that position.
It's nerve-wracking. Oh, yeah. It's gonna really.
You're just like, oh man, is this it? But then you get that feedback of like, oh, thank goodness this, you stepped up, we fixed the problem, we move on. It becomes natural, and you feel less, I guess, weird about it the more you get the feedback from the people.
Not a single time that you own a mistake is somebody going to be like, well, you're stupid for that. That's what I got. I thought that those were kind of the highlights of the responses I got. And those are some things I wish I could have had insight into when I was first in that scary process of, finishing camp and looking for a job. Like that's a really scary moment. Yeah, I wish I would have had those. That would have gave me a lot more peace of mind.
Well, Tyler, you are now offering that gift to other people, right? Because other people get to watch this conversation who are going to be where you've been and have those words. They can always pull this video back up and just listen again if they hit those moments of doubt. So as we're wrapping up, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, which you have quite a bit of, your knowledge, your experience, the wisdom, knowledge, and experience of the people that you work with and are connected with. I mean, getting to hear all those perspectives really say some of the same stuff, right? Communication, trust, ownership, character. It can sound a little bit cliched, but this is the most important stuff in a career, in a working life, because it's just humans. And we overcomplicate it, but it's just humans being humans. It's been a joy to talk to you. I'm glad that we were able to give the conversation the room that it needed to breathe, because there's a lot of really good stuff here. Now, if people want to find you and reach out to you, where can they find you?
You can find me I'm on LinkedIn.com. It's going to be Tyler-Hardiman.
Tyler-Hardiman. And I'll actually edit this in so that appears on the screen so people can just follow the link from there.
Yeah, feel free, please reach out if you decide to sign up for camp or you're in the Camp General, reach out. I love speaking with people. Same thing, connect with me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message if you have a question, if you're curious about something. I love that side of it. I love doing that. I love seeing people succeed with that. So please definitely reach out.
Awesome. Well, Tyler, again, this has been a fantastic conversation. I think people are really going to get a lot of value out of it. Thank you for your time. To all of you who are watching and listening, thank you for your time, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Have a good one, guys.
All right. Thank you, Tyler.